So, okay, well, the first speaker in our symposium is Jean-Paul Arsenault of Charlottetown. He's chair of the PEI Forest Commission, which was created by government in January 2023 to review PEI's forest policy, programs, and legislation in wake of Hurricane Fiona, and develop a forest recovery plan for Prince Edward Island. Mr. Arsenault is fluently bilingual, an islander with extensive forestry, human resources, and public policy experience. He assisted with the Roundtable on Resource Land Use and Stewardship in 1996, the Commission on Land Use and Local Governance, also known as the Thompson Commission, in 2010, and the Commission on the Land Protections Act, also known as the Carver Commission, in 2013. We're really pleased that Mr. Arsenault is the chair of this PEI Forest Commission, and we're very pleased to have him here today to speak to us.
Thank you, Barry, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, and I do see a lot of familiar faces here, I was born in Wellington and spent the first 37 years of my life there, living in the house that my grandfather built in 1914 from some wood he salvaged from a shipwreck off the North Shore. I attended UNB and graduated from there in 1975 with a degree in forestry, and started working with the forestry, what was then the Forestry Division of the Department of Agriculture and Forestry in 1979. And I was there for 9 years, the last 5 years as the director of the division. I've been away from forestry for 35 years, so I was a bit of a surprise when I got a call from government asking if I was interested in being part of this forestry commission. And of course, I was delighted to do so because I've never lost my interest in what's happening in forestry and what's happening in our resource industries on Prince Edward Island. I want to tell you a bit about the membership of the Forestry Commission, for those of you who may not know. We are 13 people, myself as chair, and the other 12 members are Marcel Arsenault of Navidad, who I'm sure you know. Marcel and I go back a long way. We've known one another for 50 years. Randy Angus from the Mi'kmaq Confederacy of Prince Edward Island is a woodlot owner living in Head of Cardigan. Crystal Pike is a woodlot owner from Fort Augustus, and she works at the Center of Climate Change and Adaptation in St. Peters Bay. Jerry Gavin from Northport. For those of you who don't know where Northport is, Alberton is a suburb of Northport. Jerry is a forest engineer who served as the director of the Forestry Division after I left in 1988. John McQuarrie of Charlottetown is a former Deputy Minister of Environment and Transportation and Public Works. Gary Schneider lives in Stratford. I'm sure you know the name. He is the founder of the McPhail Woods Ecological Forestry Project. Kyla Miller is from Surrey. She's the co-coordinator of the Surrey Area Watershed Association. Zora Wendt is from Millvale. She's a student in forestry at UNB, finishing her 4th year. Kathy Martin lives on the Eastern Road in Stanhope, or has a property, I should say, on the Eastern Road in Stanhope. She's a retired professor of forestry from UBC and an expert in ornithology. Sarah Wheatley lives in Suffolk. She's the former coordinator of the Winter River Tracadie Bay Watershed Association. Reg Conahan has a fairly big woodlot in Cardigan, and he's a forest technician, retired forestry technician who worked for many years for the Forestry Division. And Matt Hughes of Kelly's Cross is the owner of East Coast Timberjack, and he's a harvesting contractor. So that's who we are. Very interesting group. My job is very simple. It's to keep everybody at the table and make them want to come back to the next meeting. The rest, I think, will look after itself. But as you can imagine from the names that I've just outlined, they're will be areas where we'll have a hard time coming to an agreement. And I don't expect that we'll agree on everything. And if we can't, our report will indicate those areas where we don't agree and why we don't agree. But so far, we've gotten off to a very good start. A bit about our work plan. We've been asked to review legislation, the Forest Management Act and associated regulations. Now, the Forest Management Act goes back to 1988. It hasn't had any major changes since then, and there are a lot of problems with it, so we'll be looking at that. We've been asked to assist the division to develop a new forest policy. The current forest policy dates back to 2006. It's badly in need of updating. So we'll be looking at that. I'm not sure exactly what the Commission's role will be in that. Perhaps our final report will serve as a discussion paper to kick off that process. We've been asked to review forestry programs, particularly the Forest Enhancement Program and what they're doing in nursery operations. We will consult with First Nations. We have already started that process. We'll consult with interest groups, likely in private meetings. We certainly want to sit down with the Woodland Owners Association, the Federation of Agriculture, Sustainable Forestry Alliance, and many other groups that we've already got on our list. So I see that as a series of private meetings. Possibly we'll come up with an interim report, not sure yet. We will likely hold a round of public meetings. And our final report is due on March 31st of 2025. Now, 2 years may sound like a long time, but 68 doesn't sound that long ago to me. So time goes by fairly quickly, and we do have a lot of work to do. Progress to date, we've held 3 meetings. As you know, we were appointed at the end of January. We held our first meeting in February. And the purpose of that meeting, I guess, was to get to know one another and perhaps understand a little better what's going on in forestry. So we sat around a table at Upton Road, the division headquarters, and heard from Kate McCory and her group about the programs that they deliver. And we visited the J. Frank Goody Nursery there on that day as well. Our second meeting was here. We attended the workshop on March 11th called it Building Resilient Forests. A number of you were here. Very useful and very informative session for all of us, and all of our members were in attendance at that meeting. And our last meeting in early April was to learn more about the what's called the Framework Agreement. It's an agreement signed by the Mi'kmaq, the provincial government, and the federal government. It's something that will be a foundation piece of all of the work we're doing. And we also spent a fair bit of time looking at the Auditor General's report, which was released in January and was fairly critical of a couple of aspects of the work of the Forestry Division, particularly as it relates to measuring the sustainability of biomass harvesting, and also how the province is managing public forests. So we spent a lot of time trying to get our heads around both those things, the Framework Agreement and the Auditor General's report. We have 4 field trips planned. If you know some of these people, you probably understand that we'd rather spend time away from the boardroom table. We don't want to spend our 2 years sitting around the table looking at PowerPoint presentations. We want to get out to the woods. We want to see what's really going on up there. So we have 4 field trips planned. Our first one will be next Friday. We're going up west. Then we have another one planned for Central PEI. We have 2 others planned for what I call up east and down east. And in the course of those field trips, we'll be seeing a little bit of everything. We'll be seeing sawmills, we'll be seeing harvesting operations. We will meet with as many woodlot owners as we can. John Arthur Ramsey is one of them on our list, and so we want to hear from all of those people and get to know what's going on in our woods and in the forest industry. I think probably that's the most important part of what we will do in this 2-year process, is those 4 field trips. So I'm very much looking forward to them, and I know all of the members of the commission are as well. In the fall, probably, we're going to split up into 3 subcommittees because, looking at complex issues as a group of 13, perhaps not the most efficient way to do things. So we have selected a number of members of the commission to work on legislation, so that will be one of our subcommittees. Another subcommittee will look at public forest and what some of the options are for managing public forest. And the third group will concentrate on the forest enhancement program, what's working and what isn't. We've talked a lot about communications and whether we should, what sort of a profile we should have. We haven't got a Facebook page yet, and I don't know that we're going to have one. You probably haven't heard any mention of the Forestry Commission on CBC. I haven't been asked to do an interview with Compass, and I don't know if I would. If I was asked, we want to keep a low profile as a group until we've had a chance to get to know one another and a chance to look at all of the issues. But eventually, I think we will be doing a bit more. We will adopt perhaps a more public profile, but we're not ready for that yet. I'll share with you a few preliminary thoughts. We can't do our work without good data on the damage from Fiona and the updated forest inventory. We are expecting that in the next few months. I know that Andrew Wing and his group are working very hard to come up with that information, and it's absolutely critical to what the Commission does, is understanding how much damage was done by Fiona and what the state of our forest is now. We need better information on the forest industry. Kate McQuarrie made a presentation here on the 11th of March, and her information on what the forest industry is made up of dates from 2010. That's a long time ago, and we don't have that information, and we absolutely have to have that information in order to make the decisions we've been asked to make. How many people are employed in the forest industry? Who are the players? What's being produced? What's the contribution to GDP? We don't have current information on any of those questions. We need to have that. We need to have a better understanding of what's meant by duty to consult with First Nations. It's a very important question. There are some interesting things happening in other provinces. For example, in Nova Scotia, a couple of First Nations there have signed agreements with the province to manage public lands. So I'm sure that's the result of a long consultation process. We have had a first meeting, as I said, with the Mi'kmaq Confederacy, and we are gaining a better understanding of what that means, the duty to consult. The recent Auditor General's report, as I said, was very critical of forestry's ability to track biomass utilization and to manage public forests. But the auditor's report just told us where the province wasn't holding up its end. It didn't tell us why. So we want to understand why. And we will get to the bottom of it, and we will report publicly on why the division is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, at least according to the Auditor General. I will tell you, at this very early stage, it's not nearly as simple as the Auditor General stated. There are a number of very complex issues here, particularly around the biomass industry. What's the province's plan for managing public forest? Does it have the capacity to do what's needed in the long term? I'm sure you all know that the province manages 100,000 acres roughly of woodland. That's a lot of land. Does it have the capacity to manage that woodland properly as the public expects it to be managed in the longer term? Spending money, public money on private woodlots makes sense to all of you, and it makes sense to me. I was there when the Forest Enhancement Program was started in the 1980s. But still, I think the case needs to be made. There are many competing interests out there, and a lot of people are looking for government assistance. The other resource industries get it, as we know. But I still think the case needs to be made. We need to have a better understanding of what the public values are of private forests. And again, we will highlight that in our findings. And last and not least, what can we do to make our forests more resilient to climate change? So that's a snapshot of who we are and what we've done to date and what we plan to do. And I certainly look forward to talking with all of you in the months to come. And thanks again for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I know the members of the Woodlot Association will follow very closely the progress of the Commission, and we look forward to participating with the Commission on your invitation, of course. So. And forgive me for not mentioning this earlier, but we do have a message for our First Nations in this period of reconciliation. We acknowledge that the First Nations, our First Nations, have received poor treatment from our province and our country. We wish to improve communications and relationships with our PEI First Nations and see value in the traditional knowledge they have in woodland stewardship.